Imagine sitting at a $500 per plate restaurant when a trembling child covered in filth interrupts your meal with a question that shatters your reality. "Sir, can I have your leftovers?" Instead of giving her food, James Richardson did something that shocked everyone watching. He didn't give her food. He called an ambulance. Why? Before we dive in, drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Smash the subscribe button and turn on notification for more emotional stories like this. The Grand Metropolitan was the kind of place where silence cost extra. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive wine. Every table was set with more silverware than most people owned. James Richardson sat alone at table 14, celebrating the biggest deal of his career. $20 million closed in a single afternoon. His Armani suit was perfect, his Rolex caught the light, and his steak was cooked exactly how he liked it. Then she walked in. Security should have stopped her at the door. Her clothes were falling apart, a yellow dress that might have been white once, torn in 3 places. Her shoes had holes so big you could see her bare feet. She moved like she was afraid someone would hit her. She didn't belong here. The hostess was busy seating another wealthy family. The waiters were focused on their important customers. Nobody noticed the little girl weaving between tables, getting closer to the man who was about to have his life turned upside down. She stopped right beside his chair. James looked up from his phone, ready to tell whoever it was to go away. He had emails to answer, calls to return, money to count. But the words died in his throat. This wasn't just any child. Her face was so thin it looked like a skull. Her arms were sticks. Her collarbone stuck out like broken wings. She was so small, so fragile, that a strong wind could have knocked her over. And she was staring at his plate like it was made of gold. "Sir," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Can I have the leftovers from your meal?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Around them, other diners kept eating their $100 appetizers. A woman at the next table laughed at something her husband said. Someone ordered another bottle of wine. Life went on. But James couldn't move. His first thought was anger. How did this kid get past security? Why was she bothering him during his celebration dinner? He had worked hard for this moment, and now some street child was ruining it. But then he really looked at her. She wasn't just hungry. She was dying. Her eyes were sunk so deep into her head they looked like dark holes. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. When she breathed, her chest barely moved. This little girl was maybe days away from starving to death. And she was asking for his scraps. James felt something crack inside his chest. When was the last time this child had eaten? When was the last time anyone had shown her kindness? How long had she been living on the streets, begging for food that people threw away? He reached for his wallet. But as she moved closer to his table, something caught his eye. Her left arm was extended, reaching toward his plate with trembling fingers. And there, just above her elbow, barely visible under layers of dirt and grime, was something that made his heart stop beating. A birthmark. Not just any birthmark. This one was shaped like a crescent moon. About the size of a nickel. Positioned exactly 3 inches above her elbow joint. He knew this mark. His breath caught in his throat. His hand started shaking so hard he almost dropped his wine glass. The expensive restaurant around him seemed to fade away until there was nothing but him and this little girl and the impossible truth staring him in the face. He had seen this exact birthmark before. 6 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and sadness. On a tiny arm connected to machines that beeped and hummed. On skin that was pale and cold and still. His daughter's arm. His daughter who died in that car accident. His daughter who was buried in Riverside Cemetery under a pink headstone. But here she was, standing in front of him, asking for his leftovers like she was nothing more than another homeless child. Her arm trembled as she reached for his plate, but it wasn't hunger that made him freeze. It was the mark he'd last seen on a hospital wristband 6 years ago. James didn't give her food. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. "I need an ambulance," he said quietly. "And I need it now." The little girl looked confused. She probably thought he was calling security to have her thrown out. She had no idea that the man sitting in front of her had just recognized the impossible. His dead daughter was alive. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes. 2 paramedics rushed through the restaurant doors, their equipment clanking against marble floors. Other diners stared as they wheeled in a stretcher, probably thinking someone had choked on their expensive meal. They had no idea they were about to witness a miracle. "What's the emergency?" the first paramedic asked. James pointed to the little girl, who was now sitting on the floor beside his table. She looked even smaller next to the big men in uniform. "She needs help," he said. "She's starving." The paramedics took one look at her and their casual attitude disappeared. "Jesus," one of them whispered. "How long has she been like this?" They lifted her onto the stretcher like she was made of glass. She weighed nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like picking up an empty bag. "Sir, are you family?" the second paramedic asked James. He opened his mouth to say no. The words were right there. But something stopped him. "I'm coming with you," he said instead. The ride to St. Mary's Hospital took 12 minutes. James sat in the back of the ambulance, watching the paramedics work on the little girl. They put an oxygen mask over her face. Started an IV in her tiny arm. Checked her pulse every 30 seconds. She never opened her eyes. "Blood pressure is dangerously low," one paramedic said into his radio. "Severe malnutrition. Possible organ failure. We need a trauma team ready." James felt sick. This child was dying, and he had been sitting in a restaurant cutting steak while she begged for scraps. What kind of monster was he? He thought to himself. The emergency room at St. Mary's exploded into action the moment they arrived. Doctors and nurses surrounded the stretcher, shouting medical terms James didn't understand. They wheeled her into a room marked Trauma Bay 3 and slammed the door behind them. He was left standing in the hallway, still wearing his expensive suit, feeling completely helpless. "Are you the father?" a nurse asked him. "I?" James started, then stopped. "I don't know." She gave him a strange look. "You don't know if you're her father. It's complicated." 20 minutes later, Dr. Sarah Babs came out of the trauma bay. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair was falling out of its ponytail, and she looked exhausted. "She's stable," she said. "Barely. Another day or two and we would have lost her." James felt his knees go weak. "Is she going to be okay?" "With proper treatment, yes. But I need to ask you some questions." They sat in a small office that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Dr. Babs had a clipboard full of papers, and her pen was ready. "What's her name?" she asked. "I don't know." "Her age?" "Maybe 7. "I'm not sure." "Medical history?" "I don't know." Dr. Babs put down her pen and looked at him. "Sir, you called the ambulance. You rode here with her. You're clearly concerned about her welfare. But you don't know anything about her. James took a deep breath. I think she might be my daughter. You think? My daughter died 6 years ago. In a car accident. But this girl, she has the same birthmark. Dr. Babs was quiet for a long moment. That's quite a claim. I know how it sounds. We did some basic blood work when she came in, she said slowly. Standard procedure for malnutrition cases. What's your blood type? AB negative. Why? Dr. Babs's eyes widened. That's unusual. AB negative is one of the rarest blood types. Less than 1% of the population has it. And? She has AB negative blood too. The room went completely silent. James felt like someone had punched him in the chest. AB negative. The same rare blood type he had inherited from his father. The same blood type that doctors had told him would make it hard to find donors if his family ever needed them. I need a DNA test, he whispered. That can be arranged, Dr. Babs said. But first, I need to ask, if she is your daughter, where has she been for 6 years? And why does she look like she's been living on the streets? James buried his face in his hands. I thought she died with her mother. The car was completely destroyed. They told me there were no survivors. Someone lied to you. He paced the waiting room while doctors ran every test imaginable. Blood work. X-rays. Something called a metabolic panel. And finally, the DNA test that would answer the question destroying his sanity. He called his lawyer. His private investigator. His insurance company. Someone was going to pay for this. Someone had stolen his daughter and let him believe she was dead for 6 years. But first, he needed proof. At 11:30 that night, Dr. Babs found him in the cafeteria, staring at a cup of cold coffee. The results are back, she said. James looked up. Her face was impossible to read. And? She sat down across from him. She's your biological daughter. 99.9% certainty. The world stopped spinning. His daughter was alive. His little girl, who he had mourned for 6 years, who he had visited at the cemetery every month, who he had cried for until there were no tears left, was sleeping in a hospital bed 50 feet away. How is this possible? He whispered. That's what we need to find out, Dr. Babs said. Someone took her from that accident scene. Someone has been keeping her for 6 years. And someone let her end up on the streets, starving to death. James stood up so fast his chair fell over. I want to see her. She's sleeping. The sedatives will keep her out until morning. I don't care. I need to see my daughter. Comment below, who stole her? Was it revenge? A mistake? I need your theories. Dr. Babs pulled up a chair beside James in the hospital waiting room. She had a folder in her hands and the look of someone who had to deliver terrible news. We've pieced together some of what happened, she said quietly. Social services ran her fingerprints through the system. What we found is going to make you sick. The car accident had happened on a dark stretch of highway outside the city. James's wife had been driving home from her sister's house with their 1-year-old daughter in the back seat. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. The police report said there were no survivors. But they were wrong. Emergency responders were busy with your wife, Dr. Babs explained. She was thrown from the car and died instantly. Your daughter's car seat was found 20 feet away, empty. They assumed she had been thrown from the vehicle too and, well, they stopped looking. James felt his stomach twist. But she survived. She was found by the wrong people. A group of traffickers had been monitoring police scanners that night, looking for opportunities. When they heard about the accident, they got there before the second wave of emergency crews arrived. They found a crying baby in the tall grass beside the highway. Instead of calling for help, they took her. She was sold to a begging ring, Dr. Babs said, her voice barely above a whisper. These groups use children to make money on the streets. The younger and more pitiful they look, the more people give them. James gripped the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. His baby daughter had been turned into a tool for criminals. For 6 years, she had been forced to beg on street corners all over the city. She slept under bridges when it was warm, in abandoned buildings when it was cold. She ate whatever scraps people threw at her, drank water from puddles, and wore the same clothes until they fell apart. The people who controlled her moved her from spot to spot so she wouldn't get caught by the same police officers twice. She had no name except girl. No birthday. No toys. No bed. No safety. Just survival. 3 weeks ago, police raided the operation, Dr. Babs continued. Arrested most of the ringleaders. But your daughter wasn't with them when it happened. Where was she? On her own. The man who controlled her daily activities panicked when he heard about the raids. He abandoned her at a bus stop and disappeared. For 3 weeks, a 7-year-old child had been living completely alone on the streets of one of the most dangerous cities in the country. She had no idea how to find food except by begging. No idea where to sleep except in doorways and under bridges. No idea that she had a father who thought she was dead. The restaurant district has good smells, Dr. Babs said. Food trucks, expensive places like where you were eating. She was probably drawn there by hunger. James closed his eyes. While he was celebrating his biggest business deal, his daughter was wandering the streets, starving, looking for someone to give her table scraps. The worst part was realizing what his life had been like during those same 6 years. After the accident, he had buried an empty casket in Riverside Cemetery. He stood at that grave every month, talking to dirt, leaving flowers for a daughter who wasn't there. He had thrown himself into work to numb the pain. 18-hour days. Deals that made millions. Success that meant nothing because the only person he wanted to share it with was gone. Except she wasn't gone. She was 5 miles away, sleeping in alleys, eating garbage, being treated worse than animals while he lived in a mansion and complained about minor inconveniences. How many nights did she go to bed hungry while I was throwing away half my dinner, he whispered. Don't do that to yourself, Dr. Babs said. You didn't know. But that didn't make it hurt less. For 6 years, he had mourned a daughter who was suffering in ways he couldn't even imagine. He had money, power, connections, everything that could have saved her, and he never knew she needed saving. The cruel irony was impossible to ignore. He had become successful partly because of his grief. The need to work constantly, to achieve constantly, to prove that his life still had meaning even though his family was gone. All that success, all that money, all that power, and his daughter was begging strangers for scraps. She's safe now, Dr. Babs said. That's what matters. James nodded, but inside he was burning with rage. Someone was going to pay for stealing 6 years of his daughter's life. Someone was going to answer for turning his baby into a street beggar. But first, he had to focus on the miracle. His daughter was alive. Share this video. Every child deserves a home, not leftovers. Jane spent the entire night in the chair beside her hospital bed. She looked so small under the white sheets, with tubes in her arm and monitors beeping softly. But her breathing was steady now. The color was slowly returning to her cheeks. For the first time in 6 years, his daughter was safe. When she finally opened her eyes the next morning, she looked around the room in confusion. Clean walls. Soft lighting. The smell of medicine instead of garbage. Then she saw James sitting beside her. "Are you going to hurt me?" she whispered. The question broke his heart into a million pieces. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again." She studied his face with eyes that had seen too much. "Are you a doctor?" "No. I'm someone who cares about you very much." A nurse brought breakfast on a tray. Real food. Scrambled eggs, toast with butter, orange juice, and a small cup of apple sauce. The little girl stared at it like she was seeing a miracle. "Is this for me?" she asked. "All for you," James said. "Eat as much as you want." She picked up the fork with shaking hands and took the smallest possible bite of eggs. Then another. Then another. Each bite was careful, like she was afraid someone would take the plate away. James had to look away so she wouldn't see him crying. This was his daughter's first real meal in who knows how long, and she was eating it like she didn't deserve it. Over the next 3 days, he barely left her side. He read her stories from books the hospital volunteers brought. He showed her pictures on his phone, nothing scary or sad, just funny animals and pretty flowers. He talked to her about everything and nothing, just so she could hear a kind voice. Slowly, she began to trust him. On the 4th day, his daughter said she was strong enough to hear the truth. James sat on the edge of her bed, holding her tiny hand in his. "I need to tell you something important," he said. "Do you remember anything from when you were very little?" She shook her head. "You had a family once. A mommy and a daddy who loved you more than anything in the world." Her eyes got wide. "What happened to them?" "Your mommy had to go to heaven. But your daddy has been looking for you for a very long time." She was quiet for a moment. "Where is he?" James took a deep breath. "I'm your daddy." The words hung in the air between them. She looked at him with those big, serious eyes. "Really? Really? I thought I lost you forever, but here you are. You found me in that restaurant, and now we're together again." Tears started running down her cheeks. Not sad tears, happy ones. "I have a daddy. You have a daddy who loves you so much. And you're never going to be hungry or cold or scared again." She threw her arms around his neck and held on like she would never let go. "I want to go home," she whispered. "Then let's go home." 2 days later, James carried her out of St. Mary's Hospital and into a world she had never really known. His penthouse was on the 40th floor of the city's most expensive building. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below. Everything was clean and bright and safe. "This is where we live?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. "This is where we live," he confirmed. "You'll never sleep on a bench again." He had turned his home office into her bedroom. Pink walls, a bed with more pillows than one person could ever need, shelves full of books and toys. Everything a 7-year-old girl could want. She touched the soft blankets like they might disappear. "This is mine. All yours." That night, he tucked her into her new bed and read her 3 stories. She fell asleep holding his hand, and for the first time in 6 years, James Richardson slept peacefully. His daughter was home. The next morning, he woke up to a sound he had forgotten existed. Laughter. His daughter's laughter, echoing through the halls of a home that had been empty for too long. She was finally where she belonged. 6 months later, James Richardson stood in front of the St. Mary's Hospital Board of Directors with a check in his hand. $1 million. This money goes to the Children's Rescue Program, he announced. Every dollar. Every cent. So that no child has to sleep on the streets while their families think they're dead. The room erupted in applause, but he wasn't finished. I'm also funding a new task force to find missing children from old accident reports. If my daughter survived when everyone said she didn't, how many other children are out there? How many other families are grieving empty graves? The police chief nodded. We'll start immediately. That same week, his daughter, Emma Richardson, walked into Lincoln Elementary School for her first day of first grade. She carried a pink backpack filled with new supplies. Her hair was clean and braided with ribbons. Her dress was the right size and had no holes in it. Most importantly, she wasn't afraid. "What's your favorite subject?" her teacher asked. "Reading," Emma said with a huge smile. "My daddy reads to me every night." No one at school knew her story. To them, she was just another 7-year-old starting her education. They had no idea they were looking at a miracle. James picked her up after school and took her for ice cream, just like normal fathers do with their daughters. They sat in the park and watched other kids play on the swings. "Daddy," she said, chocolate all over her face, "are you rich?" He thought about his penthouse, his cars, his bank accounts. 6 months ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. Now he knew better. "I'm the richest man in the world," he told her. "But not because of money." "Because of what?" "Because I have you." The cruel truth was that James had always been wealthy in the ways that didn't matter. Money, success, power, he had it all. But he had been poor in the only way that did matter. He had been alone. Now he understood what real wealth looked like. It looked like bedtime stories and scraped knees and laughter echoing through empty halls. It looked like small hands holding his and sleepy voices saying, "I love you, Daddy." Fate had written their story with scars and a birthmark, with 6 years of pain and 1 moment of recognition. It proved that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in second chances. Sometimes the most precious things in life come to you when you're least expecting them. Sometimes they come disguised as a hungry child asking for leftovers. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more emotional stories.